Here's what's coming up on Network Africa. Kenyans protest after new travel tax on tourists and citizens. Junior Navy officer who was a mastermind of a foiled coup in Gambia sentenced to 12 years in prison. Plus, Egyptian ambulances, aid trucks cross into Gaza. Hello and welcome to the program, everyone. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. It's rather a chaotic mood in Kenya today as citizens have been reacting to the news of a directive by the revenue authorities which seeks to impose tax on travelers. According to the Kenyan Revenue Authority, visiting tourists and citizens returning to the country will be subject to taxation if their personal or household items is worth $500 and above, giving no exception to new or used goods. This move has sparked a public outcry, causing protests, which many Kenyans say would scare away tourists from the country. A section of Member of Parliament said that some KRA officials have been taking advantage of the directive to harass tourists, giving the country bad publicity. However, the Minister of Tourism, Alfred Mutua, has described the move as one of the reasons the number of tourists visiting the country has been declining. Meanwhile, Kenyan President William Ruto has praised King Charles for his courage and readiness, which signals progress to rewriting the atrocities of the colonial past. During a state banquet hosted by President Ruto, King Charles acknowledged the wrongs and abuses of the past, saying he deeply regrets the atrocities suffered by Kenyans during their struggle for independence from British colonial rule. King Charles and Queen Camilla, who are on a 4-day visit to Kenya, have commemorated World War fighters and veterans and are also expected to tour conservation work in a wildlife park and travel to the port city of Mombasa.
Asanteni sana. This is a highly encouraging first step under your leadership to deliver progress beyond tentative and equivocal half measures of past years. We are therefore confident that under your visionary leadership, the Kenya-United Kingdom relations will continue to prosper for the benefit of our two countries and peoples. And if colonialism was brutal and atrocious to African people, colonial reaction to African struggles for sovereignty and self-rule was monstrous in its cruelty. It culminated in the emergency, which intensified the worst excesses of colonial impunity and the indiscriminate victimization of Africans.
The wrongdoings of the past are a cause of the greatest sorrow and the deepest regret. There were abhorrent and unjustifiable acts of violence committed against Kenyans as they waged, as you said at the United Nations, a painful struggle for independence and sovereignty. And for that, there can be no excuse. In coming back to Kenya, it matters greatly to me that I should deepen my own understanding of these wrongs and that I meet some of those whose lives and communities were so grievously affected. None of this can change the past, but by addressing our history with honesty and openness, we can perhaps demonstrate the strength of our friendship today. And in so doing, we can, I hope, continue to build an ever closer bond for the years ahead.
Joining us now is VOA's Nairobi Bureau Chief Maria Medalo, who joins us from Nairobi in Kenya. Good to see you yet again today on this historic visit of the British monarch to Kenya.
I'm very happy to be here. I'm happy to talk about things that are not war, although I think we haven't talked about Sudan in a while, so we might have to come back to that one of these days very soon, hopefully.
So first, help us understand how the Kenyan-UK bilateral ties has been before King Charles' visit.
I think it's good to remember that the relationship between the royal family and Kenya has been there for a long time. It's good to remember that Queen Elizabeth became a queen while she was visiting basically Kenya in 1952, and when the death of her dad was announced, that's how basically that's when she became queen. So Kenya has always had a very kind of symbolic significance for the royal family. As analysts have told me, it's like, yes, even after, when you think about just all the stuff that has been talked about recently with some of the atrocities, some of the things that has happened during colonialism, and some of the activists have also been fighting and have been talking about not just during colonialism, but there are other things that they accuse Britain post-colonial, during the post-colonial times. But there have been relationships. The ties are still there. The economic ties. I think the two militaries have security ties where they do training. So there are a lot of things that happen. Like during this trip, even I think there were a few MOUs that were signed. The first one I think was by the foreign minister, and the other one was basically between the two education ministers. So the relationships have been there, regardless the ups and downs of what has happened, over the years.
A lot of pressure for King Charles and for the people of Kenya who had probably been waiting with, bated breath to just listen to the king say those words they've been aching to hear. And he, of course, expressed, greatest sorrow and deep regret for the abuses of the UK's colonial past. What does the average Kenyan have to say about this? How are they reacting now that they've heard the king say those very words that they've been longing to hear?
I think it's a first step. Some people really respect him for that. Some people, think that I was shocked to hear it because I interviewed somebody who said that they didn't want all the issues to kind of overshadow his trip here. They think that it's sometimes time to move on, but that's a few people who have said that. Obviously, it's hard to move on when, some of the people who have lived those atrocities are still living. Even if they respect him for that, even like President Ruto said, it's a first step. Many people think that also, they think of it as just words, they want action. That's, many people during this trip, people that we interviewed, people that we talked to, are talking about reparations, or talking about, let's say we take the examples of the Mau Mau's, the uprising in 1952. Yes, 10 years ago, they were compensated, and it was about 5,200 veterans who, of the Mau Mau group that were compensated. But that's not everybody. And also, those people at the time, welcome the acknowledgement and the little payment, but they thought that it wasn't enough for the pain, the suffering, and all the long-term effects that has happened since then.
And what else has the king been up to today? How are the people receiving him?
Well, that's the thing actually in Kenya. It's like you hear both sides all the time. You hear the activists, and in fact, I have to mention this, some activists have tried to have some demonstrations and have not been able to, are being pressured by the police. They can't assemble. At the same time, when you go to these events that King Charles is participating in, it's amazing. Yesterday at Eastland's Library, people were elated. People felt special. People really sincerely looked like they enjoyed enjoyed having him around and having him come to Kenya. Today, he actually commemorated, him and Queen Camilla started the day by commemorating some World War II veterans at this place, at this cemetery called Kariokor. And what he did while he was there, they did a moment of silence, they laid a wreath. But another thing they did was that they actually had medals that was there to give to a few veterans who are still alive, including one that was 104, another one that was 117. I mean, it's really amazing. So some of those veterans who were there today basically have lost their medals for whatever reason. They were there, the king was there to actually give them medals again. So that was one side of the things that he did today. After that, he went to the UN, and then he went to Karura Forest to highlight basically the importance of green space, green spaces. So I was there, and basically when he was there, to do that, he had people like, marathon runner Kipchoge was there to help him kind of highlight that part. He also had, I think, the daughter of Wangari Maathai, who was also there. And the other highlight of the day was that he got a chance to plant a tree with a 10-year-old. And the girl happened to basically write to Buckingham Palace when she learned of the king visiting. She wrote asking to plant a tree with the king. They responded to her. And it happened. And when I talked to her afterwards, she couldn't believe it. She said to me, I was a little bit nervous, but I'm just happy everything went well. And I can't believe that it actually happened. So really, you see it on both sides, just the pros and the cons with this trip. So I think while I was coming in here, I think he's supposed to meet some artists like the fashion community. And then he was supposed to basically participate in a party at the UK High Commissioner's residence, just doing all of that stuff before he leaves, I think tonight, to go to Mombasa.
Right, one more story out of Kenya just before I do let you go. The outrage in the country over the new tax laws which will tax tourists, coming into the country, even returning residents, taxing them for whatever the value of their goods that they bring in. Outrage in the country. Talk to us briefly more about that. Any updates? What are the people saying?
Well, I think the tax issue in Kenya is actually, it goes even beyond the Kenyans. I mean, I, as a foreigner who have been living in this country, basically, I don't want to beat a story, but I'm just going to give you an example because about taxes. I think that, just recently I've gotten shipments and things like that where, some of these people will look at your goods where some of the financial bill had said that it shouldn't apply to, for example, household goods. But then you'll have people come up to you and say, well, you have books, you have this, you have that, and so you need to pay this amount of tax on it, even when you insist that it's household goods. It's a book that you've read, maybe it looks new, but you're not here to sell it. Anyways, that's just a small, short story. But I think for the Kenyans, the high cost of living, let's not forget the Maandamano protests that have been happening, the past few months. Yes, it has died down, but I think the high cost of living was a big part of it, was a big part why the Kenyans were protesting. And I think taxes over taxes. I think at this point, from most of the people that you talk to are really, they're feeling the pinch. And then, adding taxes to it. I don't know one person who's going to tell you, yes, this is great. They understand sometimes you might need to tax citizens to pay off debt, which Kenya has also been struggling with. But at some point, I think if you're not making enough money to even live, to just, have your basic necessities and things like that, adding taxes to it is going to create, basically what you're seeing, a little bit of outrage here and there. So I guess we'll find out in the next few days, next few weeks, what will come out of that.
Right. Thank you so much, Mariama, for all those updates. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome back. As the United Nations peacekeepers exited Mali on Tuesday, a rebel group known as Tuareg has come out to say they have taken over the Kidal base in the northern city. The rebel group claimed victory and control of the base immediately after it was vacated by the UN mission. According to the UN mission in Mali, MINUSMA, the decision to withdraw from the area comes after its last convoy of peacekeepers suffered two explosive attacks by jihadist and separatist violence. Mali's military government has demanded that the UN force leave the country by the end of the year, saying its decade-long mission against Islamist militants had failed. And it's a day of reckoning for a junior Navy officer who has just bagged 12 years in prison for his involvement in a foiled coup plot in Gambia. The Gambian government named Lance Corporal Sana Fadera as the mastermind of the coup in December last year. A high court ruled that he planned and attempted to unlawfully overthrow the democratically elected president, Adama Barrow. According to authorities, 7 other soldiers were charged along with Fadera with treason, conspiracy and inciting mutiny for their alleged role in the 2020 coup attempt, while one soldier who has been on the run has been declared a fugitive. The court also acquitted a police officer and 2 civilians who had been charged with concealing, treason and conspiring to commit felony. Well, as part of humanitarian assistance, various ambulances and aid trucks have crossed from Egypt's side of Rafah into Gaza to transfer the injured to hospital in North Sinai and deliver aid. Green ambulances can be seen lining up and waiting entry into Gaza. According to officials, Qatar had mediated an agreement between Egypt, Israel and Hamas in coordination with the U.S., which will allow limited evacuations from the besieged Gaza Strip. The agreement would also allow foreign passport holders and some critically injured people to leave through the Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza, though there's no timeline for how long it will remain open for evacuation purposes. And Sudan's army leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, has paid a frontline visit to 2 strategic bases in the capital Khartoum and Omdurman, where he inspected troops following battleground losses to rivals from the Rapid Support Forces over the past week. General Burhan downplayed statements by the RSF that since 26 October it had seized 3 army headquarters in Darfur. Hundreds of soldiers had defected to the group, including in Khartoum, and captured the airport in West Kordofan. He accused the RSF of staging attacks despite the ongoing peace talks in Saudi Arabia, saying the military would fight on. However, General Burhan said the army was committed to talks in Jeddah to end the war that erupted in mid-April. A U.S. couple has been fined by a Ugandan court for torturing their 10-year-old foster child after court documents showed that the couple served the child cold food, made him sleep on a bare wooden platform without bedding, and forced him to squat in an awkward position for over 2 years. The couple, Nicholas and Mackenzie Spencer, who were charged and arrested last year, have been ordered by the court to pay the 10-year-old boy about $28,000 in compensation after convicting them of cruel, inhumane or degrading treatment. The compensation resulted from a plea deal which led to the court dropping charges of aggravated trafficking and torture that could have led the 2 being sentenced to life imprisonment or the death penalty. On Tuesday, they pleaded guilty to the charges working without permits and staying in Uganda unlawfully, for which they were fined 4.86 million Ugandan shillings. However, that ruling has angered some child rights activists who termed it a mockery of justice. And here in Nigeria, the Minister of Interior, Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, is assuring Nigerians that his office is coming up with a comprehensive review of migration and visa policies with the support of key stakeholders, in the country aimed at easing all the processes for Nigerians home and abroad. Mr. Tunjojo stated this on Tuesday in Abuja when he received the chairman CEO of Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, NIDCOM, Honorable Abike Dabiri-Erewa, who led the management team of the commission on a courtesy visit. He decried the lopsidedness in some migration and visa policies which tend to make Nigeria a dumping ground. The minister said that the review will take cognizance of the principle of reciprocity in line with international standards. Earlier on, Mrs. Abike Dabiri-Erewa commended the dynamism brought in by the Minister of Interior in the improvement on issuance of passports to Nigerians home and abroad. A violinist is using music and arts to explore the painful legacy of how laborers in wineries in Western Cape Province of South Africa were given wine as part of their payment for centuries, a practice known as the DOP system. The system, which began at the time of slavery in the 17th century and persisted until the recent past despite attempts to abolish it, caused high rates of alcoholism among mixed-race workers who, for historical reasons, were the main labor force at the wineries.
Violinist Lane Rudolph, who goes by the stage name Daphne, wanted to expose how the DOP system, a practice of paying laborers with wine rather than cash, introduced by Dutch colonialists and maintained under apartheid, had damaged the mixed-race community's culture and entrenched harmful stereotypes.
When you think of a colored and what I've seen on social media, TikTok, all of these things, I see that to be colored means to be violent and it means to be drunk.
The term colored, considered racist in some cultures, can be used in a neutral way in South Africa to talk about people who are of mixed race. Rudolph created and performed in a show called Dop is My Taal, which means alcohol is my language in Afrikaans, at an arts venue in Johannesburg. The show involved Daphne playing music she had composed, interspersed with excerpts from the South African national anthem, while another musician performed using beer bottles, domino pieces and thimbles, objects associated with the daily lives of farm laborers.
The only memories that we have, or only stories, cultural stories that we have are, oh yes, you know, your great-grandfather was maybe Scottish or Irish or Spanish. And growing up, for me, my experience of being colored was that we never spoke about our black ancestors. So it was always just that you acknowledged, yes, you're quarter Spanish, you're quarter this and that, but there's a very euphoric claim to being maybe 5% European. So how do we even start to break down our identity and see ourselves as people, as new speakers, when we are denying ourselves the right as, you know, the First Nation?
An audience member says the DOP system created a cycle of dependency, subjugation, poverty, abuse, and high rates of fatal alcohol syndrome, whose impact was still affecting communities today.
For me, it really registered in so many ways because we struggle to fit in. It's always like it's either you over or you under, so you always have to fit in some way. So I love the fact that she's taking upon herself to do a work that speaks for so many other voices which won't speak because it's either you black or you white.
Other audience members at the performance of Dop is My Taal feel satisfied that the work has articulated uncomfortable truth and given expression to a part of South African society that sometimes feels marginalized.
That's our program today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.